I'll be talking about it. Dennis Prager here. Join me this morning at 11, right here on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We're broadcasting live from Judson University in Elgin this morning, and
Go fast, the crowd is growing.
Pleased to have a featured speaker on campus, part of their Constitution Day program. He's New York Times bestselling author Eric Metaxas, the host of Socrates in the City, or Socrates for you Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure fans. Great books on Dietrich Bonhoeffer, on William Wilberforce that was made into a movie, Amazing Grace. Martin Luther, we're not going to go over all 95 theses today, but we'll touch on that. And a new book coming out, I think we almost have an exclusive on this, showing his range, Donald Drains the Swamp, which is a kid's book. Eric Metaxas, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So you finally wrote something I could read.
Well, let me tell you something.
Book.
Yeah, there you go.
First of all, look, I don't like sassy morning hosts, so you back it up, sister.
Yeah.
I've had enough.
Sister, you sound like Maisie Hirano.
Listen, seriously, please, no. Actually, seriously, I've written 30 children's books.
Really?
Yes, and I've written for VeggieTales. Have you heard of VeggieTales?
Yes, I have
you eat
VeggieTales.
vegetables? Well, I have written for VeggieTales. I wrote, some people have heard of Lyle the Kindly Viking.
Yes.
I wrote the Hamlet Omelet parody. Yes. And I'm the voice of the narrator on the Esther video. So I'm famous in the vegetable universe.
I'm waiting for the Hamlet Omelet parody to come to the Shakespeare Theater in Chicago so I can see it on stage.
I'm happy to do it, but I want to play Ophelia. But listen, that's too weird. No, I have to tell you, I've written a lot of children's books. People don't know. I mean, I'm confusing because I've written these biographies of mostly, Bonhoeffer, Luther, Wilberforce, but my new book is another children's book, but it's also a humor book, and it's called Donald Drains the Swamp. Simplest plot in the world. There's a caveman named Donald. He's kind of got this blondish hair.
Did you have anybody in mind that inspired the story?
Not offhand,
right.
No. And so Donald, he's a caveman, and the cave people, they've got a problem. The king lives in the middle of a swamp, and he never listens to them anymore. He's out of touch with the people he's supposed to represent. He only talks to the swamp creatures. And basically the people say, we're frustrated. What do we do? So they go to this businessman named Donald. He's a builder of caves. And they say, Donald, can you help us? He goes, sure. Tomorrow I'll go down to the swamp. I'll see what's going on. So he goes down. He talks to the swamp creatures. And the first swamp creature he meets is a labiosaurus. Don't laugh. It's very serious.
Yes.
And the labiosaurus says, you don't understand. The king only talks to people who live in the swamp. If you want to live in the swamp, you can live in the swamp. And Donald says, I don't want to live in the swamp. Thank you very much. He goes back and he says, we're going to have to get drastic. We're going to have to get really drastic. They say, what are you talking about? He goes, we're going to have to drain the swamp. And he goes back the next day with a shovel, and he meets the biggest, baddest swamp creature of all. It's the George-osaurus.
I see what you did there.
This is sort of Flintstonian.
Oh, totally. But he drains the swamp, and at the end they ask him if he wants to be the new king. And he says, no, you're a free people now. You don't want a king. You get to tell your leaders what to do. And they said, you mean like a president? And he goes, yeah, and if that's what you're looking for, I'm your caveman. And so it's a very, very happy, sweet book. It's fun for all ages.
It sounds like it. I hope you'll be marketing this on college campuses around the country. We just mentioned that.
I will not.
Well,
I'm not even going to talk on radio programs. I really won't.
Why?
It's just going to market itself. People are interested in a happy, but these are such tough times. I mean, we don't even need to talk about Kavanaugh. It's been such a divisive time in our country. We need to laugh. We need to celebrate. We've got a president who's a bit of a caveman, but guess what? We hired him to drain the swamp. He's trying to do that. Ultimately, it's happy news, but we need to be able to laugh.
But we have to compete because we just mentioned earlier in the show, there's a children's book author that's making her way around college campuses with Colin Kaepernick as the avatar to combat racism in America.
Good luck with that.
Well, I mean, just saying.
That sounds like a real cheerful read.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's mostly for the professor.
I know. No, I think that we do have to laugh. I mean, again, I'm pretty eclectic. I've written a lot of humor. I wrote humor for. When I was in college, I was a Yale English major. By the way, I don't recommend Yale. People think like it, but I don't recommend it.
I hear it's a real party school.
It's kind of a, oh, that's funny.
The freshman dorms I hear are happening.
Let me tell you something. No kidding. It is, it's spiritually and politically, it's a very dark place. It's kind of like, lockstep, politically correct, and which to me is a huge bummer. But I guess when I was there, I was the editor of the Humor magazine. So I've written a lot of humor, and something told me that things are so tough in this country right now. A funny book like Donald Drains the Swamp, that's kind of like what I was in the mood for. So.
Well, we have to stick on Yale. My observation of Yale is, to borrow from Buckley, neither God nor man exists at Yale anymore.
Well, it's kind of true. When Buckley wrote that book, that was describing the Yale of the late 40s. Just imagine, we're talking about that long ago, Buckley saw it as a place that was anti-faith, anti-God, and effectively communist in terms of the, not only the politics, but the economics and so on and so forth. He identified this, how many years ago is that? That's 70 years ago, and it's only gotten worse. I was there in the 80s, and it was the place that I learned about political correctness.
Well, by any chance, did you know Brett Kavanaugh or Deborah Rodriguez?
No,
were you groped by him?
Did you go to a freshman party in the dorm?
Are you guys shock jocks?
No, I'm
Suddenly?
sorry.
What is happening?
It's 8:30.
What
We're
is
about
Did
to
you
be.
have binge drinking?
It's
Boofing,
an
whatever that
interesting
is.
thing, because I actually said that when you hear about this, you think a lot of people did stuff like that in college. Like, it just sounds like drunken, stupid. And if somebody did that to my daughter, I would find them and kill them with my bare hands, right? However, the idea that you come out of the weeds 30-something years later, that you don't tell anyone about this for 30-something years, and just as the person's about to be, on the Supreme Court, you come out with this as though it's the most important thing in the world. I thought, that just stinks to high heaven. It just smells bad. And then I found out yesterday on my own radio program that this accuser, this woman, sat on the board, listen to this, you cannot make this up, sat on the board of a $160 billion company that produced one product, the abortion pill.
Right.
And I thought, are we making this, is this a joke? It's not a joke, it's actually true. That's the woman that comes out of the weeds at the 11th hour to defeat this, to my mind, extraordinarily qualified man. It just doesn't seem right, and I think most Americans kind of get that. It's just so dark that we've descended to this. I mean, that we fight our political battles this way. This is not the way to do it.
Well, last night, Brett Kavanaugh and his wife, Ashley, broke their silence and spoke. Were you able to see any of it, and was he believable?
Yeah, I caught a little bit of it. Oh, there's no doubt that he's believable. I mean, this is the whole thing, is that when you really know the guy, and I've watched enough to get a sense of who he is, you don't get to be who he is without being who he really seems to be. In other words, it's not like some guy who comes out of nowhere and then this stuff comes out. That just doesn't make sense. I mean, he has an extremely public record, and so this is about as low as we've gone in our politics, and I'm worried about our country, to be honest.
And it's remarkable, too, I mean, to see 87 women hold a press conference for him on Friday, and all of the women going back to high school who have signed letters of support, and classmates who've signed letters of support. So, I mean, in terms of the manifest weight of the evidence, corroborating one story versus the other, pretty overwhelming.
Well, the reason I find it so cynical is because, as we all know, there are real women who have really suffered sexual abuse. And so to cynically trade on that in order to defeat this guy, in other words, to trade on the Me Too movement and the kind of trend that we're feeling right now, this is a serious problem. And anybody who's experienced sex abuse knows it doesn't get more serious than that. So the idea that this is now the political weapon that we're using, it's really ugly. We've got to rise above this, because we're going to take the whole nation down. Nobody's going to win.
I want to go back to the Ivy League, since you're a graduate, and I mean, the irony of most of these Ivy League schools being founded as divinity schools.
Yeah. Well, Yale was. In
Right.
1701, it was founded by people who expressly wanted to train up ministers to preach the gospel. I mean, it's an amazing thing that all of these institutions have gone as far in the other direction as you possibly could.
And so Penn law professor Amy Wax has told us on our show, that the Ivy League schools it's not recoverable. It would be better to close them down and start over.
I would totally agree. I would never want my kid to go to an Ivy League school. In
Really?
fact, absolutely. You see, the thing is, parents are fooled. Parents think, oh, it's Yale, it's Princeton. Right? Let me tell you something. If you don't go in there as a missionary to change that culture, if you go in there with an open mind, you're dead, because there is no room for conversation. You go onto those campuses, and unless you can hide away with a group of sane people who think as you do, you're going to get rolled. It's just like everybody drinks the Kool-Aid, and by the time you graduate, you have effectively thrown away all the values your parents probably raised you to believe in and paid a lot of money for you to go to school.
Well, and I say the exact same thing about my alma mater, Northwestern. People think, oh, I'm joking around, whatever. I'm not joking around. The idea of paying $250,000 to go to a totalitarian re-education center like Northwestern, or like these Ivy League schools, is insane.
Well, first of all, we're not joking. Like, this is absolutely real. In other words, you're not exaggerating when you say totalitarian. I mean, you may be exaggerating when you say totalitarian, but the idea is that the thinking is the same. The ideas on which our country was founded, in which these schools were founded, the idea of open debate, believing in truth, having a conversation, they don't want to have a conversation. They've come up with what they think are the answers, and they just want to shut down conversation. So when you talk about sexuality, when you talk about any of those things, they don't want to know anything that might lead them to a more nuanced view. They want to shut down debate, and the way they do it is by demonizing their opponents, calling you a bigot or whatever it is. That's the climate, obviously, in the mainstream media, in places like New York City, where I live. People in the heartland know this is wrong. People with common sense know that something is going on, and I really think, you know, to get back to my book, Donald Drains the Swamp, I feel like we have to, on some level, laugh, because you can't change common sense. A rooster will never lay an egg. So we can talk about transgender all we want, but most people who try to live their lives and make a buck and raise their kids, they know that there are certain things that you can't change, and they're tired of it. I think most of them are probably just, you know, turning off the TV.
Well, but then, so how would you, I mean, and by the way, over the last couple of days, two really good think pieces, one from different perspectives. Andrew Sullivan in New York Magazine, we were talking about Shelby Steele's piece over the weekend in the Wall Street Journal about the left having hate and nothing else to offer these days. So how do you combat that? You just laugh it off?
Well, I think it's a number of things. Part of it for me, again, I'm not kidding when I say that I wrote this book because I think we need to be lighthearted on one level about it. I mean, most people know that Donald Trump is not Hitler 2.0.
Right.
And so when people say that, what do you do but laugh? You could say, look, you might not like him, you might disagree with him, and you might have principled reasons for disagreeing with him, but when you go to the level of saying, we've got to invoke the 25th Amendment, we've got to impeach him, you think, my goodness, people have lost all perspective and all historical perspective because they're historically ignorant. If you have any sense of our history as a nation to make those kinds of claims, first you have to laugh at it and you have to mock the people who say these things. But then, of course, you do have to fight. I think that everybody has to vote in these midterms because our nation is genuinely at stake. I am not, I don't want to be a Cassandra, you know, I don't want to be a Chicken Little. I want to nonetheless tell people, look, this is unprecedented. When you have an election as we've had that is trying to be overturned by any means necessary, it's tantamount to a coup or to a civil war. You have to take it seriously. So I do laugh at it, but on the other hand, I take it very seriously because this is a great country. If we lose what we have here, there's nobody waiting in the wings with freedom and with the banner of liberty to take our place. I mean, there's China, there is socialist Europe. We really, to use Lincoln's phrase, are the last best hope. You know, we have to take that seriously. God has given us this platform, this nation, for his purposes in history, and there are people, poor people, people without liberty around the world who are looking to us. So I really do take it seriously.
So maybe you're not a Cassandra, not a Chicken Little, maybe a Diogenes, but looking for more than one honest man.
Oh, I
in
like
the swamp.
it. I love the fact that you brought up Diogenes.
Diogenes.
I just came back from Greece, so
maybe that could be a spin-off of Socrates in the city.
Diogenes in the city.
Diogenes in the park, maybe.
That's kind of cynical. Diogenes in the city. Is there an honest man? Anybody?
Well, wrong city.
Yeah.
He is Eric Metaxas, best-selling author.
I'm speaking tonight at a church.
At
Yeah,
Emmanuel
there you go.
Lutheran Church in East Dundee at 7 o'clock, and he'll be
Okay.
signing copies of your new book, Martin Luther.
Yes. Well, actually, I'm
Should be
signing
a friendly
copies of
crowd.
all of my books.
All of his books.
Martin Luther, the book just came out in paperback. I'll be signing copies of that. I'll sign copies of any book tonight, and I'll be there as long as people want to get a book signed. But that is in East Dundee, 7 o'clock, Emmanuel Lutheran Church. Please come.
Good time to talk about challenging papal authority. You could even get Catholics like me
Why not?
involved in that, right?
Oh, don't get me started. Holy cow.
For more information and to get tickets,
ahead.
you can go to 560theanswer.com/Luther. That's 560theanswer.com/Luther.
You should also pick up his books on Bonhoeffer and William Wilberforce while you're at it. And forthcoming book, when are we going to see Donald Drains the Swamp on Amazon?
Oh, like it's on there now.
Oh, it is.
Donald Drains the Swamp. Check it out. I mean, I also have a website. It's just go to google.com and just kidding. It's ericmetaxas.com. But if you go to Google, you can find me there, Eric Metaxas.
What if we search at DuckDuckGo? Can we find you?
You could search at Bing. Do whatever you need to do. Eric Metaxas.
Eric Metaxas, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
My joy.